I was without a broker for a couple of months, but after that, when I realized that I was going to have to go ahead and get my broker's license, I took a year, basically a sabbatical, so that I could study for my broker's license, start my own company. I had to focus on that for probably it was about a year, but it was significant. You can't, as a real estate agent, you have to go out and pursue your business, and a lot of it is word of mouth. So a lot of damage was done, and my focus had to be on basically, saving my business rather than going out and looking for clients.
This is Tyler O'Neill, a senior editor at the Daily Signal. I'm honored to be joined by Julie Mauck and her attorney, Jonathan Vogel, and then Doug Turpin, who's president of the Coalition for Liberty. I wanted to, just bring people up to speed real quick on the case because, I haven't spoken with you in months, Julie, and I know, what happened earlier. I've heard recently that the judge made this anti-SLAPP ruling, but if you could, I know it's a little painful, but if you could walk us again through what happened, why you temporarily lost your broker, what it means, and why this lawsuit is so important.
Sure. I'll go ahead and just kind of brief you on what actually happened, and I'll leave the legal stuff to my brilliant attorney, Jonathan. But July of 23, I went to a local library board meeting to speak out against a book, a very salacious and vulgar book that was in the children's section. And a lot of people from our small community, I live in a very small rural community here in Georgia, and a lot of people showed up to speak out against this book and some other inappropriate children's programming that was sexualizing children. And the adjacent county also, which is a very liberal county, it's where UGA is, also had a coordinated effort from different organizations within that county to come and protest us speaking out against this media. And some of the organizations that were involved were Athens Pagan Pride, a transgender queer school for children called Our Resilient Community, and an anarchist group called Mutual Aid Athens. They made a concerted effort to also show up at this library board meeting. But as I was speaking during public comment and asking the library board of trustees to remove this book and reconsider some of the programming, I was shouted down and jeered at, and they were very hostile toward me, obviously. I may have been targeted a bit, but that evening, a couple of the people who were there reached out to my real estate broker. I've been a real estate agent for over 20 years, and they reached out to my broker and tried to cancel me, asked him not to work with me anymore because I had made a comment that the entire LGBTQ community were pedophiles, which is not what I said at all. They completely misquoted me. As in order to try and cancel me. And then a couple months later, they actually filed an ethics complaint for hate speech against me with the Georgia Association of Realtors. And so I was basically left without a brokerage, which in Georgia, in order to do real estate, you have to hang your license with a broker. So I was left without a brokerage, and a lot of things were being said about me that weren't true. So, it was hard to find another broker who would engage me. So I eventually did, and I eventually went on to get my own broker's license so I don't start my own company so that I don't have to go through that again. But it was very difficult experience.
How long were you without a broker, and how much money would you guess you have lost specifically for that?
I was without a broker for a couple of months, but after that, when I realized that I was going to have to go ahead and get my broker's license, I took a year, basically a sabbatical, so that I could study for my broker's license, start my own company, and I had to focus on that for probably about a year. And so, I haven't really put numbers together specifically, but it was significant. You can't, as a real estate agent, you have to go out and pursue your business, and a lot of it is word of mouth. So a lot of damage was done, and my focus had to be on basically saving my license and getting my broker, saving my business
Yeah.
rather than going out and looking for clients.
Well, so Jonathan, I think this is a natural time to ask, what has happened with this lawsuit? Why are we, coming back after these months? From what I've heard, the judge has ruled against Julie, but you've been able to appeal the case.
That's right. In the trial court, the judge dismissed the lawsuit under Georgia's anti-SLAPP law. That's a law that is meant to curtail lawsuits that are without merit and are just trying to stop people from exercising their First Amendment right of free speech or right to petition when there's a governmental issue. Specifically, the law is meant to address only those issues that are issues of public interest or public concern. In this case, Julie brought this lawsuit against communications that these individuals and organizations had with her broker, she just explained to you, and with the Georgia Association of Realtors, and none of that were matters of public interest or public concern. Rather, they were private interests and really a private vendetta to try to get Julie terminated from her livelihood and disciplined by the Georgia Association of Realtors. And unfortunately, they were successful for a time in that. And so we have filed an appeal at the Georgia Court of Appeals, alleging that the trial court made the wrong decision in dismissing the case under the anti-SLAPP statute. We filed our brief on March 20th. As of the time of this taping, that would be yesterday. And we are very eager and excited for the Georgia Court of Appeals to review the dismissal and to reverse it and get us back to the trial court where we can proceed with the case against these people who tried to cancel Julie.
So, Doug, I think this is a natural time to bring you in because you can talk about the ramifications of what has gone on here. Because, when we were speaking over the phone, you told me that the idea that you would be smeared in this way, be effectively fired for a time, and then the court would just let it go is really offensive. It opens the door for a lot of cancel culture actions that people can take to push people out of the public, out of their jobs, essentially.
Yes, that's exactly right. Essentially, if this ruling stood, because anti-SLAPP laws are designed to protect people against wealthy people or wealthy corporations trying to file nuisance lawsuits against somebody to shut them up for something they don't want somebody to say, whether it's true or not. And so this is turning everything on its head. This would mean if somebody knowingly lied about you in a vindictive manner to try to get you fired from your job or otherwise harm you, and then you tried to defend yourself by going in there to the courts for redress, that you would owe them their lawyers' fees and lose in an anti-SLAPP, even if what you were filing a lawsuit for was completely true. Now, just for context, just bringing this back. So Coalition for Liberty, what we do is file lawsuits against people who are knowingly trying to cancel people, take their jobs away. Somebody like a Julie, everyday Americans out there that don't have anywhere else to go. And we will defend the everyday American that is trying to exercise free speech. And Julie, all she did was ask for a book to be moved to the adult section of the library. It wasn't banned. Anybody could have picked this book up and given it to their children. And somehow or another, the librarians were able to get information out that had all of these woke crazies show up, and activists who were advocating for completely inappropriate, highly sexualized books to remain in the young children's section of the library. Julie's a hero. She went out there and simply spoke at the request of people in her community because she's a Moms for Liberty chapter chair. And she asked for the book just to be moved. It was a very innocuous request. She never said what they alleged she said, and they knew it because this is a recorded section. This is a recorded session before the trustees. So it was completely apparent when we hired Jonathan to represent her before the Georgia Association of Realtors. This was in Athens, Georgia, a very liberal area. And the first hearing, they actually said the truth does not matter. Feelings matter. And by the way, pedophiles are a protected class. Can you imagine? They told Jonathan pedophiles were a protected class. And I believe Jonathan said, I'm a former federal prosecutor. And I can tell you, that's a felony. That is not a protected class. But according to the woke crazies, it is. So we ended up going to an appeal. And then after I sent them a letter saying I was planning to go to the media and take legal action against Gar, that they decided maybe she wasn't actually guilty of this.
Wow.
So then when Julie tried to use her right to get redress under the law, then we hired Jonathan to file a lawsuit with the idea of wanting to deter this kind of behavior. I want people on the woke side to know that you can't cancel and destroy somebody with lies to try to get your point of view across. Those days are over. So what they did, though, was get a pro bono attorney and file anti-SLAPP laws to try to shut her up. It's taking everything on its head. That is the inverse of what anti-SLAPP laws were designed to do. So we are taking to the Court of Appeals. We are very confident that the Court of Appeals will see that there was an error made, that you can't take everyday Americans and deprive them of their right to seek redress under the law and make them pay the attorney's fees when people knowingly lied. It's beyond dispute what she said. It was recorded. So there is no point of fact in dispute. And the judge overlooked that and decided that Julie didn't get her day in court.
Yeah, this reminds me so much of the tactics that we see from the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has put Moms for Liberty on the hate map, which always uses, they're trying to demonize anyone who complains that these sexually explicit books are in schools. And then they also have this thing where they've demonized conservative Christians, calling them anti-LGBTQ plus hate groups because, and this is the exact same thing they accused you of, they say that these people are claiming that all homosexuals, all LGBT people are pedophiles. This is not what people say. And I want to hear a little bit more from you. Like, did you even mention pedophiles once in your remarks?
I did, but the context in which I said it was that LGBTQ IA plus means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and the plus goes on to be inclusive of pedophiles, which is, in fact, I can back that up. I had researched it before, I said it, and it depends on which pod of the pride community you're in, but they call them minor attracted persons, and they like to align with the LGBTQ plus community. But I've also been called a biblical terrorist. Anytime you quote scripture or anything, you're a biblical terrorist to the left. It's bizarre. We've just reached a really bizarre time in this country. And the venom, while I was speaking at the library board meeting, it was palpable. It was frightening. It was really, I got an email from somebody afterward that said they had never felt such a dark, just a dark, angry mob that way. It was really awful.
Interestingly, there was a biological woman with a full beard standing behind her with a sign that said, what was it? Joy is.
It said not joy. A lot of people, have quoted her as saying joy is for all ages, but the actual sign said joy is all ages, which to me has a completely, different meaning. And that particular person really was focused on me from the very beginning. They tried to get me not to speak. People had crossed my name off of the list, the speakers list, and so there was, a decision had to be made by the board whether or not they would even allow me to speak at public comment. They finally did, but this person was very focused on me, and they're also part of an anarchist organization here called Mutual Aid Athens. So,
Has that group been involved in any of the actions we've seen? Like, I know, and Georgia's a big state, so this is in a different part of the state. But I've seen there's a lot of, there was an Antifa action in 2023 against this new police facility that they were building. Was there any involvement or connection between that group and actions like that?
Yes, actually, Mutual Aid Athens, the anarchist group that I just mentioned, that this person who happens to be one of the people who filed an ethics complaint against me, the back of the Joy is All Ages sign actually said, "Stop Cop City."
Oh, wow.
So, yes. Same people.
Well, so, Jonathan, if you would talk about the strengths of Julie's case and why anti-SLAPP is not applicable in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Anti-SLAPP laws are terrific laws generally. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. So the idea that there should not be defamation lawsuits against people merely for speaking up, petitioning their government, or otherwise speaking up on issues of public concern is generally a good thing. The problem is when the anti-SLAPP law is weaponized to go against someone who, ironically, in this case, Julie, was actually exercising her free speech rights at the library that day. So it's quite ironic to have the defendants in this case kind of turn around and use the anti-SLAPP statute against Julie. And the problem is they're using it here in the wrong way. As I noted earlier, if these folks made their comments in some way to the government, or in some other way where they were expressing themselves on issues of public interest or public concern or a public debate, but what they expressed to Julie's brokers and to the Georgia Association of Realtors was not about some public debate, whether it was the public debate in the library or whatever. They were trying to get Julie terminated from her job. It was a very private interest and private concern and personal vendetta. And that type of communication is not something that kind of satisfies step one of the analysis of an anti-SLAPP motion. In fact, the Georgia Court of Appeals very recently issued a decision that is somewhat similar to our scenario involving a cheerleading coach. And there was a rival cheerleading team that made communications to a cheerleading association. And that case was dismissed using the anti-SLAPP statute, and the Georgia Court of Appeals reversed it, vacated the dismissal and sent it back to the trial court. And that's a very, very recent case out of the Georgia Court of Appeals. And so we think our case is quite similar to that one. And so we have high hopes that the dismissal will be reversed and that we'll be able to proceed at the trial court. And we think that our case has wonderful merit. I mean, we have a claim against an organization called Athens Pride that it was engaging in unfair and deceptive business practices because it was deceiving Julie's brokers and about what she had said and other things that were in her past that weren't true. So it was kind of using its business to create deceptions. And we have a claim for defamation and interference with business relations against another individual that we were just talking about. And absolutely what these folks were saying was untrue about what Julie said at the library and other things that she had done, and interfering, of course, with her business relationship with her broker. So we think our claims have merit. We just need to get back to the trial court and pursue these claims.
And that's the second step, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, but in anti-SLAPP law, the other defense is if something's true. And the key thing here is the actions of these individuals are so heinous because they knew what they were saying was false. They knew this was a vindictive vendetta to try to silence Julie simply for speaking out at a public library, which is her right. And I think 80% plus, hopefully, of Americans would be, from all the polls I see, do not think that highly sexual books should be available for 5-year-olds. It's a very common position. They cannot win, and they know they can't win because their opinions are very unpopular, other than through cancel culture. Our objective is to end cancel culture, end the knowing lies told about Americans just to get them fired from their jobs, destroy their reputations. We're going to file lawsuits and hold them accountable. No one's ever done that before, and so we want everyday Americans to know Coalitions for Liberty has got your back. If somebody is doing this to you, we will file a lawsuit against them and make sure that they are named and shamed in the media and everybody knows who they are and what they did. That's how we get the cancel culture to stop.
That's right.
When
Julie and other people who speak up for the well-being of children are doing the right thing, and they're courageous by going to government meetings and speaking up that way. It's those people that try to get Julie fired or terminated and disciplined in her profession. They're doing the wrong things, and when they cause damages, then victims can and should seek redress in the courts.
I think it's important to point out too that those who spoke out against that book actually won, and it was voted by the library board unanimously to move the book from the children's section to the adult section, which is what we had all asked for.
That's important. Yeah, I also wanted to know who was it who called you a biblical terrorist, and was there anything else that happened during the Georgia Board of Realtors adjudication that we should be aware of?
I honestly, off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and look at screenshots and so forth to see about the biblical terrorist comment. So I can't remember that. But like as Doug pointed out, you see things on TV and you think, oh, well, that's just a very small number of strange people who would say these things, but when you're in a professional ethics hearing and you hear the chairman of that ethics hearing actually say the truth does not matter, whether it's true or not, if it hurts feelings, it's hate speech. The context in which it's said does not matter, whether she was at a library board meeting or shouting it from rooftops. Doesn't matter. If it hurts feelings, it's hate speech. And then goes on to say pedophiles are a protected class because I believe he said it's a sexual orientation. And that just, your jaw just drops and you think, what has happened? How can anybody think that? How did we get here?
And that's the problem
when,
when these folks went to the Georgia Association of Realtors, it creates something that spins out of control, right? Where you have a panel of real estate agents that are affiliated with this, voluntary professional membership association that is very important for real estate agents to kind of, preside in this kind of pseudo court type of, environment. And then these words are spoken. I mean, these aren't real judges. These aren't even lawyers who were, presiding in this in the ethics proceeding. And then things are said, and Julie needs legal representation, and then that's a high cost. And that's what was put in motion by these defendants in the lawsuit, or one in particular who filed the ethics complaint.
Well, I really glad to have all of you on. And I think it's a really important case, a really important story. Is there anything else that you want to add? I'll just go to Doug, Jonathan, and then back to Julie to finish us off. So, Doug, is there anything you add?
Coalition for Liberty is a nonprofit And we're defending the right of everyday Americans to say what they think without fear of being destroyed anymore. This got out of control because the cancel culture radicals realized they could attack everyday Americans, and they didn't have the money and the resources to hire an attorney to defend themselves. So they've been pushing radicalized agenda to make people afraid. It's the greatest weapon of the left. We're going to take that away from them because they can't win by destroying people and making us afraid to oppose just horrible sexualized books in the library or things like that. Those would never win and never get accomplished but for the fear that these people are using with cancel culture. We take that away from them and let people know that they can say what they think, and somebody like us will come and back them, and letting the left know if they do this, this is wrong, and they will be held accountable in the court of law and also in the court of public opinion, because we'll make sure that people like you carry these stories. And I thank you so much for what you're doing and making sure people get to hear Julie's story.
Thanks, Tyler. We're optimistic that Julie's case at the Georgia Court of Appeals is going to be successful, and it's going to create a precedent throughout Georgia that these types of private communications to one's employer and one's professional membership organization do not satisfy the anti-SLAPP statute, and that cases like this can proceed. And that's going to be a very important precedent because it goes right to the heart of cancel culture. Attempts to defame people to their employers to get them fired are going to backfire if it caused damages. And frankly, I think it's going to be a case that the entire country is going to take a look at, and other state courts might borrow from Georgia. So we're hopeful and optimistic that we'll prevail at the Georgia Court of Appeals.
Thanks. And Julie, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Doug and Jonathan. I mean, without Coalition for Liberty and Jonathan, I'm just so well represented, and I'm just so grateful for them championing this for me, because it was a very lonely, scary place to be. And to know that they've told me multiple times, we've got your back to the end. You know, they've got me. So that makes a difference, and I appreciate you covering it. But this hate speech stuff has to stop. I mean, it all depends on who decides it's hate speech or not, and it's just gotten a little crazy. So
If you need a good realtor, Freedom Realty.
Freedom Realty USA, and we donate a portion of our each commission to United States Veterans Nonprofit. So
Nice. Well, that's
Julie's a hero
great.
in our eyes.
Well, thank you again so much for speaking with me and drawing attention to this really important case. And I wish you the best of luck in court. Again, this is Tyler O'Neill with the Daily Signal signing off.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.